The research has revealed that people are not simply born homosexual. We also know that it's not a choice. People don't choose their attractions.
I experienced it more as a form of detachment from my father and an aversion to him, which was concurrent with a strong attachment to my mother.
One of the things that plays a role for some people who end up with a homosexual orientation is a boy's sense of his own masculinity or a girl's sense of her own femininity.
I was really attracted to masculinity because it was something that I felt so much deficit inside of me, and there was a longing to try to connect with something that I viewed as strong and healthy masculinity.
I really wanted to be those men. I was hungry for their masculinity.
He soaks in femininity at a time when he's craving masculine input.
I had a lot of feminine with my mother and my sister, and that brought a lot of insecurity about who I was as a little boy.
If he feels rejected or perceives rejection, he will still want the relationship, but he will give up trying. They call it defensive detachment. It's where he says, well, if you don't want me, then I don't want you.
I remember as he was hitting me, thinking to myself, you're not my dad. You don't love me. And I'm not your son, and I don't love you.
We can only handle so much rejection, and so he puts up a wall to the dad and what the dad represents, which is masculinity, but deep down inside, he's still craving the dad's love.
And so in order for his pain against me not to hurt as much, I had to pretend that he wasn't really my father. It was really somebody else doing this. And so I separated my identity from my own father.
Then when he goes on to school, around the age of 5 or so, he will often have a hard time connecting with other boys. Either he's just more comfortable with girls because that's what he's known and that's what he's familiar with, and he lacks confidence with the boys, or if he has acquired any feminine mannerisms, he may be rejected by the other boys.
I was teased tremendously in school by my peers. I was rejected. I was made fun of.
I was called sissy. I was called a girl sometimes, and I was excluded from playing with other boys.
They're saying that I'm, a faggot. They're saying that I'm gay. They're saying that I'm a sissy boy. So rather than trying to fight them and say that I'm not, why don't I just be?
When I was, I guess maybe somewhere around 14 or 15, he said, Frank, you are homosexual. I said, Pastor, I don't know what that means. But he told me that God had made me gay, that this was a special blessing from God to be homosexual.
I was very feminine, hung up with the girls, didn't play with the boys. As things went on, I was branded a homosexual before I knew what it was.
When I was 16, he picked out a man in the church to be my lover.
Around first grade, we started experimenting with each other, if you will. It satisfied something and it set something else in motion, which was actually pretty shameful. All of a sudden, I'm in school and people that I knew were accusing me of being a homosexual. Well, I was horrified. I had never thought of myself as that.
I see one key figure in our life, and it was this lady who looked like Marilyn Monroe. She was very voluptuous, very beautiful, blonde hair. When she would come over to our house, she would tease me about girlfriends. And because she looked like Marilyn Monroe, because she was so voluptuous, being humiliated by that kind of a figure began to instill in me a fear that a sexually mature woman would humiliate me.
I was safer around women, and I liked to be around girls, and all of my friends were girls. I didn't have anyone helping me navigate this world of being male.
He's watching the boys and he's wanting to be accepted by them and wanting to bond with them and have friendships with them, but usually unable to. And so he goes through those very important years, soaking in more femininity.
There were a lot of strong women in my life and very few men. It seemed women were the ones that made the decisions, got things done, told the men how to spend the money. So I didn't see much advantage in being male. Also, since I was the highly emotional, artistic, aesthetic kid, I didn't fit in very well with what was expected of the little boys.
And so by the time he reaches puberty, he's not going to be romantically attracted to girls. He already knows about girls. What's mysterious to him and unique to him are boys. And so that longing for male love, that emotional need that went unmet, now becomes a sexualized need.
When puberty kicked in, all of these desires that I had, wanting an in-depth and very intense relationship with the little boys, actually became sexualized.
Many teenagers that grapple with this secretly have a great deal of hopelessness. They believe that they were born this way, there's nothing they can do about it, and they're often hesitant to talk about it. The truth is that they weren't born that way, and that change is possible.
I grew up without a father until I was about 4, and I didn't trust men.
Between 1.5 and 4 is usually a time called the gender identity phase. They begin to very slowly and subtly separate from that oneness and that attachment to the mother and begin to look to the father to attach themselves to him. The dad, by spending time with his son, by verbally affirming his son, little by little, the dad imparts to the son a sense of masculinity and a sense of what it means to be a boy.
My father just wasn't there, so basically just felt alone. With an increasing sense of feeling inferior.
I never heard from my father, I love you, you're my son, you're good. I don't remember him ever hugging me, although I'm sure he must have.
There are many boys that grow up in single mother homes and they don't end up homosexual. So it's a father or a father figure, someone that he can look to, that he can bond with and feel a sense of connection with.
My perception was that my father wasn't there enough for me, that he didn't care for me, that he didn't love me.
Perceptions are everything. It's not so much what happens to us, but how we perceive what happens to us that matters. And so I know a lot of wonderful, loving parents that loved their children, but somehow their child did not necessarily perceive that love.
My parents divorced when I was 7. I was already feeling a great distance from my father, and a feeling that he greatly valued my older brother, who was interested in so many things that I was not.
Usually they're more sensitive and usually very smart and very perceptive, even somewhat analytical, where they are paying very close attention to everything that's happening and taking it all in, and even sometimes taking in more than, they're reading between the lines and they're taking in even more than is intended.
I, on the other hand, was very sensitive, and I grew up feeling completely unloved.
I was the emotional, sensitive young man, artistic and very intuitive. And my dad was the Navy boxer. I disconnected from him.
Either they're just perceiving that there isn't a dad, or they're perceiving that the dad is not safe or not welcoming. And again, it could just be their perceptions. I've known fathers that love their children, but maybe they got loud when they were angry. They didn't mean harm by it, but maybe just they became loud. To a sensitive 2-year-old boy, a loud, yelling man can be very scary. And so it's easier to stay attached to the mom than to leave the comfort of that attachment and attach to the dad if the dad appears scary or unwelcoming or unsafe.
The world of men was kind of scary and unknown and not too secure. I didn't have much information. My father was pretty quiet.
My same-sex attraction was actually an attempt to pull away from mother, because there had not been that fatherly presence to draw me into his embrace where I could identify with him.
Other ways that rejection can be conveyed unknowingly is sometimes if fathers want to help their son become, a man, and they say things like, you're not tough enough, or, you're a sissy, or you're a mama's boy, things like that can make a sensitive boy retreat and not want to connect with the dad, and also not feel like he has what it takes.
At around the age of 4, I got scared in my bed and I ran into their room and asked him if I could sleep with him and my mom, and he got angry at that point and said, get out of here, you little sissy, and go back to bed. It was kind of one of those things that kind of began the rejection of my dad as a kind of scary person.
Before we can be attracted to the opposite sex, we first need to understand and be completely comfortable in our own gender and be comfortable with who we are. And so little boys need plenty of time bonding with other boys before they can become attracted to girls.
So much of identification with the same sex occurs in the context of play and bonding with other little boys in a troop bonding it's called.
So he looks to the boys to give him a sense of who he is as a male. He wonders, am I going to fit in with them? Are they going to accept me? Will I be a part of their group?
And I had an extra step in coming into troop bonding which actually didn't happen for me until I was in the gay lifestyle.
I began staring at the successful males in the school, just looking at them, trying to figure out what makes them so successful. Why are they so popular? And I tried to emulate the way they dressed, the way they combed their hair, the way they walked, the way they talked. And that search quickly became envious because sooner or later when you're starting to do that, you realize, well, that tall, athletic quarterback, I'll never be like him.
I started noticing at that age, 13, 14, 15, my attraction towards other guys. I didn't connect it in a sexual manner.
So this search that you began innocently to try to figure out how to be like somebody, well, eventually turns into envy in many cases because they have something you will never have. And that eventually turns into idolatry.
When a boy would show interest, it would start out pretty natural at the very beginning, but eventually it would turn into something a little bit obsessive.
I thought that I was gay, but I never said anything to anyone because I was so afraid.
It's very easy for you to mistake that pull that you're feeling towards other guys to try to complete yourself as a sexual thing. And you start saying to yourself, oh no, I must be gay.